What's up, everyone? You know how sometimes you open your bathroom cabinet, pick up your toothpaste, and just think, man, this stuff is so normal. Minty fresh, smooth, easy. But I know, crazy, right? Toothpaste wasn't always this pleasant. In fact, if you traveled back about 4,000 years ago to ancient Egypt, you'd probably be brushing your teeth with some seriously gross stuff. Imagine powdered crushed animal bones, burnt hooves, even mouse brains mixed into a gritty paste. Sounds like something out of a horror movie. But nope, this was their version of dental hygiene. And today, we're diving deep into this dark and dirty history of toothpaste, how people kept their smiles clean before modern science gave us that perfect squeeze tube. Stick around, because some of these facts will make you never want to complain about your toothpaste again.
By the way, if you're into these kinds of weird and fascinating history facts, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. I've got plenty more stories like this coming up.
All right, let's start with what exactly went into those ancient toothpastes. So, Egyptians were pretty advanced in many ways, building pyramids, inventing writing, and yes, caring about their teeth. But their toothpaste? Well, not so much. The main ingredient was often crushed ox hooves. Yep. That's basically animal nails ground to powder. They also used burnt eggshells and pumice stone, which gave the paste a rough, abrasive texture, basically like brushing with sandpaper. But it gets worse. Sometimes they'd add ashes from burnt mice or even powdered mouse brains, probably believing these odd ingredients would keep their teeth healthy or ward off bad spirits. You know how sometimes people think if something looks gross, it must be strong or effective? Well, that was basically the mindset back then. And the smell? Imagine a mix of burnt bones, herbs, and desert dust. Not exactly minty fresh. Despite all this, they believed it worked. After all, they didn't have dentists or modern knowledge, so any rough cleaning was better than nothing. Rich Egyptians even had servants who prepared fresh batches every morning, which shows how important oral hygiene was in their culture, even if the methods were questionable. Now, let's zoom out from the mixing bowl of doom and look at why Egyptians even bothered with all this. See, ancient Egypt was big on appearances. They believed a clean body, and yes, clean teeth, was a sign of respectability, health, and even moral purity. Bad breath wasn't just unpleasant, it was basically social exile. Imagine walking into a banquet smelling like yesterday's fish market. Not good. For the rich, dental care was a luxury service. Servants might prepare fresh tooth powder every morning, often storing it in small carved jars decorated with symbols of health. Rich folks even had specially shaped sticks, kind of like proto-toothbrushes with frayed ends for scrubbing. For the poor, they might use whatever abrasive powder they could find. Crushed limestone, sand, or cheap burnt herbs. No fancy jars, no servants. Just grit and determination. Literally. And here's the twist. Despite all this effort, archaeologists have found that many mummies have terrible teeth. Worn down, full of cavities. Turns out, their bread was full of sand and grit from grinding flour, so they were basically chewing sandpaper their whole lives. Toothpaste helped, but it wasn't a miracle cure. Okay, so here's the big question. Why on earth, or rather, why in the afterlife, would you put ground-up skulls in your mouth? Part of it comes down to symbolism. In ancient Egyptian belief, bones, especially skulls, were thought to hold a kind of lingering life force. Using them in medicine or hygiene wasn't just practical, it was magical. Mouse skulls in particular were believed to protect against toothaches and evil spirits that lived in the mouth. It sounds superstitious, but remember, they didn't have microscopes. If something hurt, they assumed it was caused by bad energy or invisible creatures. Also, in a society obsessed with death and rebirth, using animal remains for health was, well, just part of life. The line between medicine and magic was blurry. And hey, if the paste was rough enough to scrape plaque off, they considered it a win. It's one of those moments in history where cultural beliefs and practical results accidentally work together, even if the method makes us gag today.
Ancient Egypt wasn't alone in the let's put weird stuff in our mouths trend. Across the Mediterranean, the Greeks took a similar approach, but with their own flair. They liked abrasives like crushed oyster shells and coral mixed with vinegar or salt. Imagine brushing your teeth and getting a seafood aftertaste. The Romans? Oh, they went big. They famously used urine. Yep, human urine. The ammonia in it actually works as a cleaning agent, but still, it's pee. And they didn't just use it locally, they imported Portuguese urine because it was the best. That's dedication. Over in ancient China, tooth powders might include burnt pig hooves, salt, and aromatic herbs like ginseng or mint. At least they tried for a fresher smell. What's fascinating is that despite oceans and cultures separating them, these civilizations all agreed on one thing: teeth needed scrubbing. And if it was rough enough to scrape stuff off, it was good enough, even if it made you smell like a fish market, a stable, or worse. Here's the thing: none of these people had microscopes. No one was swabbing plaque and peering into a petri dish. Science was mostly trial and error, and sometimes just straight-up guesswork. They knew that certain powders could scrape off buildup. They knew herbs could cover bad smells. Beyond that, it was all theory. Germ theory wouldn't arrive until the 1800s, so when someone had tooth pain, they thought it was caused by tooth worms or bad spirits. Without knowing about bacteria or acids, they relied on texture and superstition. If it was rough and it stung a little, that meant it was working. And to be fair, some ingredients did help. Salt kills some bacteria and charcoal can absorb odors. The problem was those same abrasives also wore down enamel, which your teeth can't grow back. So ancient tooth care was a weird mix of partial truth, total guesswork, and the occasional accidental win. Fast forward a few thousand years, and toothpaste started looking a lot like what we have now. By the 1800s, European and American chemists replaced bones and ashers with chalk, soap, and sometimes baking soda. Then came the magic ingredient: fluoride. In the early 20th century, scientists realized it could strengthen enamel and prevent cavities. Marketing teams jumped in, adding peppermint oils for that fresh feeling and packaging it all in those shiny, convenient tubes. By the mid-1900s, toothpaste wasn't just about health, it was about image. Ads promised wider smiles, fresher breath, and more confidence. Suddenly, brushing wasn't just hygiene, it was a lifestyle. So in just a few centuries, we went from grinding up animal parts in the desert to squeezing out a cool blue gel that tastes like wintergreen. Honestly, I think we got the better end of that deal. So what have we learned today? First, that history is full of people putting questionable things in their mouths, and not just at questionable street food stalls. From crushed ox hooves to oyster shells to Portuguese pea, our ancestors would try just about anything if they thought it would give them a cleaner smile. The Egyptians were pioneers in the sense that they cared about oral hygiene. Even if their recipes sounds like a dare you'd give your worst enemy, it showed an understanding that teeth needed attention. They set the stage for thousands of years of experimentation. Some clever, some not so much. The Greeks refined it with their own abrasives, the Romans got, well, very personal with their methods, and the Chinese added herbs for flavor. Each culture brought its own twist, proving that a healthy mouth was a universal goal, even if the path to it was full of burnt bones and strange brews. And while the science was sketchy, they did have one thing right: cleaning your teeth matters. Sure, they might have over-scrubbed their enamel away in the process, but the habit stuck. Over centuries, trial and error gave way to chemistry and marketing, until eventually, brushing became something we can do without gagging. Next time you're in your bathroom, toothpaste in hand, take a second to appreciate that it's mint-flavored and not mouse-brain flavored. That the worst thing you have to deal with is maybe running out of it, not sending someone out at sunrise to crush bones and mix powders. And here is your fun fact to share. The world's oldest known toothpaste recipe, found on a piece of papyrus from around 500 AD, included rock salt, dried iris flower, pepper, and mint. By all accounts, it worked surprisingly well, though the pepper probably gave you a morning jolt stronger than any espresso. So yeah, dental care has come a long way. We can thank thousands of years of weird, smelly, and sometimes downright gross experiments for the minty freshness we enjoy today. And if history tells us anything, it's that the future might bring something even better, but hopefully not skulls.